Hi folks, welcome to another video from Marcus, which I'm calling a side grade video, and we're going to look at moving from two 1070 SLI Founder Edition cards from EVGA over to a 2080 XC card from EVGA. And we're going to do a couple things. We're going to look at the reasoning for the side grade, benchmarks, overclocking, advantages and disadvantages of this, and some conclusions. Just to note that I should give credit to somebody who had already coined the term side grade from Reptile Experts, so you can go to this location, and they did this side grade for the same reasons as I did, but at 1440p, so I just wanted to give credit to that. You might ask yourself, why do this? Well, it's a good question. Not many people would do this, quite honestly, given that there is comparable performance. And really there's a cost to do this, approximately the cost of a 1070 already. My main reasons were for dumping the SLI and the fact that SLI is becoming less and less supported in AAA titles. So I'm sort of jumping on the bandwagon to a single card before it's really too late. And you are getting the DLSS ray tracing potential in the new cards. And the other main reason really was to sell my 1070s before they lost a lot of value. Currently, I already sold them for half price. So why not a 1080 Ti then? Well, there are several reasons. One of them being that it's the same price as a 2080 anyway in Canada. Similar performance to a 2080, and it's really not future looking. So, you know, I don't know why you would go backwards, quite honestly. And they're sold out here anyway, so those that are available are way overpriced. So why not a 2080 Ti then? Well, I have several good reasons, but keeping in mind that you are guaranteed 60 FPS in 4K most of the games, except for maybe Odyssey, I hear. The cost of these is unrealistic in Canada. They're really almost 2K, and they have really poor cost performance ratio of all the RTX cards. So really hard to swallow that kind of money for a single video card. It's a big investment given that RTX may be short-lived. If DLSS and ray tracing tech doesn't grab with developers or gamers, it's an uncertain future whether, you know, we'll go forward with RTX or NVIDIA will continue to support RTX. I think they will. I think they've invested a lot of money in it, but it's still some uncertainty here. And there are a lot of RMAs with the TIs, at least the Founders Editions, and some add-in partners such as EVGA and others have experienced this issue as well. So keep that in mind. So yeah, just there's a link there to read a bit more about that RMA issue if you want. So then enter the 2080 XC I bought, which has similar performance to the 1070 SLI, as we shall see, but has a better cost performance ratio compared to the 20 Ti. It's still not that great though, so just keep that in mind. So my current setup is as follows. Much of it hasn't changed from previous videos, except maybe the drive for gaming drive. Here's the 960 Evo at an NVMe drive, so that's about the really only change. And the case, perhaps the Be Quiet Dark Base Pro 900, which I didn't list here, is a change from other videos. So it's a beautiful case, and I'll do a video on cooling and noise performance balance in the future. So here's some benchmarks. Really the story here is that there's about 10% loss in FPS when SLI scales well. So for instance, in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, there is a drop in FPS at ultra settings, but in AC Origins, because it doesn't support SLI, there's a 75% gain over the SLI setup. So that for me was one of the main reasons I did buy this card. But there is loss of FPS overall in the Unigine benchmarks. It's greater than 10%, and Metro Last Light, it's about the same 10%, but keeping in mind we're over 60 FPS here anyway, so it's not a big deal. But you know, one doesn't want to lose FPS when you're gaming at 4K and you're less than 60. You know, no loss is great, so I wasn't happy to see that. I'm going to talk a little bit about overclocking now. And this is my setup for overclocking. I use MSI Afterburner. I put 115, increase the power limit to 115, temp limits 85, 160 on the core clock, 100 on the memory. I don't believe in overclocking memory substantially. That's the current setup. And then my fan curve. This is important to know because at 75 degrees, my fans only run at 65%, so this is a balance, noise, and performance balance I seek in my gaming room. So others may dial it up more to 80% or something, but it will be noisy. But just to know that that's my current setup for the fan curve. And I log performance with HWinFo64, and you can do that using a very handy little icon on the bottom right-hand corner that logs a CSV file. So you get all the raw stats. A sample's taken every few seconds. I don't know exactly, but you can get a lot of good information, and that's what I used for this next bit of information. So overclocking the 2080 really is actually pleasurable. It's quite a nice card for overclocking, and what I did was I took 3 passes of AC Origin's benchmark tool with 90% average GPU loading using MSI Afterburner log file, and you can just scroll down and see when the GPU is loaded because that's a separate metric recorded by the software, so that's very useful. It's about 10 minutes long, and the bottom line is I only got about a couple more FPS with the overclock. That's not really, yeah, it is a factor, but it's not an important one. The main thing is that the temperature is really looking good, but only about 72 with the mode being the most common temperature over the 10 minutes. The fans are spinning up to almost 2200, still not super loud, which is nice. And the GPU clock was greater than 2000 almost all the time, which is really nice to see. With the 1070s, they would drop down into lower 1900s and high 1800s. Given that their cooling wasn't as efficient as these current ACX cards. So I practically had the same overclocking profile for both SLI and the 2080. Now, what is useful here also is the fact that there was no effect of FPS on the FPS with 300 on the memory. So you might see something at 500, maybe it's a frame, but trust me, there's not a lot of impact from overclocking memory. It probably, in fact, adds to heat more than anything. But for power-wise, it's very nice to see that only about 230 watts used versus about 330 at stock for the 1070 SLI, and this is also at stock, the 232. And you overclock, this probably would get up another 30, and this would probably get up another 30. So we're seeing about 100 watts difference in power consumption between the two setups, which is something to consider and often overlooked. This is a nice benefit I did not expect. Improved visuals in one of my most favorite games, Elder Scrolls Online. I play this a lot. I have thousands of hours in the game. I'm maxed out in terms of the cap. And immediately I noticed improved shading, reflections, and texture detail. When you play a game that much, you know immediately when you see improvements. And trust me, there is. I didn't expect it, so that was a really nice benefit and made it worthwhile almost for me because I do play this game a lot. Just another little screenshot showing some of the shading here and lighting, although not immediately apparent to you probably in the YouTube video. And it looks nice in the case. The 2080 is quite a nice card. The LED, RGB LED strobes if you want. I just have it on solid here, but you can make it look quite pretty. So let's get to then what are the advantages and disadvantages of doing this side grade. Well, the advantages are for the 2080 that it's $200 cheaper at the time of purchases of both setups. I saved about $200 with the 2080. There's smoother performance, especially at less than 60 FPS at 4K. And there's a noticeable improvement in detail, as I said, in the ESO at 4K, which is very nice. Consistent high overclock, cooler operation, potential for DLS and ray tracing in the future in game. So that's unproven yet. So, you are gambling a bit that this will take off, but I think it will. Driver updates could improve FPS. Keep that in mind. That's generally the rule for GTX cards and Pascal and other generations, that you do see improvements over time. How long? I don't know, but look for that. And you can play games with adequate frame rate with no SLI profile. So, in other words, single card benefit over the SLI when there's no profile for SLI. Quiet operation, nice RGB, and low power all make it, very, very good things to consider. However, the disadvantages are significant, and that is it's expensive for a single card. It's a $1,200 offering in Canada for this card after taxes, and it cost me $500 to dump the SLI. In other words, the difference of selling my 2 cards versus buying the new one. And it's not as powerful in SLI at 4K in some games, and I was a bit disappointed in that. So, that's something, if you are pure FPS minded, then I don't think this is for you. So in conclusion, I generally don't recommend this side grade unless you really hate SLI or need to play a game not supported by SLI. That is, some of these Assassin's Creed games, for example, for me. It's a confirmed side grade. It's a bit of a downgrade, in fact, when you're looking at FPS only at 4K. However, the unexpected visual enhancements in ESO was very nice and almost worth it alone for me, because I do play this game a lot. If you want the benefits of a single card at higher resolutions, then I would not go to a 1080 Ti. I would simply buy one of these 2080s. It's forward thinking and there's no reason to go back. I think it'll only improve with time. It is a costly conversion from the SLI versus the FPS gain if you look at that metric alone. And keep in mind that the 2080, like the 1080 Ti, is good enough for 4K, but not always at ultra settings. So yeah, that's the story here for me, and I hope you enjoyed that video, and look for new videos coming up for me in the future. Thanks for tuning in. Cheers.